You seriously made a rule about shoes? Mason stood in the middle of our new kitchen, holding the paper I had taped to the refrigerator like it was evidence in a criminal trial. I tightened my grip on the cardboard box in my arms. It's not a rule. It's a request. His eyes moved down the page. No shoes past the entryway. No wet towels on furniture. Label your leftovers. He looked at me again, one eyebrow raised. This is definitely a rule sheet. I already hated him. That probably sounds dramatic, considering we had known each other for less than 20 minutes. But I had reasons. Mason Reed had taken up most of the refrigerator before I even arrived. There were meal prep containers stacked across 2 shelves, 3 kinds of protein shakes in the door, and a gallon of milk sitting where my coffee creamer was supposed to go. His gym bag blocked the hallway. His sneakers were beside the couch. And he spoke in short, flat sentences that made everything sound like an order. The leasing office said the bedroom on the left was mine. I told him. It is. Your boxes are in it. Mason glanced toward the hallway. Temporary. You could have moved them before I got here. He folded the paper and placed it back against the fridge. You could have texted. A knot formed in my chest. I did. He pulled his phone from his pocket, looked at the screen, then winced. Wrong Ethan. I stared at him. How many Ethans are in your phone? 2. That's already too many. For half a second, his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Then it disappeared. He walked past me, close enough that his shoulder brushed mine, and started moving boxes out of my room without another word. I told myself the small jolt in my stomach was irritation. It definitely wasn't because he was tall, broad-shouldered, and annoyingly good-looking in a faded gray t-shirt. That would have been ridiculous. I had just escaped a bad relationship and an even worse apartment. The last thing I needed was to notice my roommate, especially this roommate. By 6 that evening, we had argued about the thermostat, cabinet space, and whether a cast-iron skillet belonged in the dishwasher. At 7, I texted my best friend, Claire, "New roommate is unbearable." She replied immediately, "Hot unbearable or serial killer unbearable?" I looked toward the living room. Mason was kneeling beside the coffee table, tightening one of the loose legs with a screwdriver. His dark hair kept falling over his forehead, and every few seconds he pushed it back with his wrist. I typed. Both, unfortunately. Your table was about to collapse, he called without looking up. I was going to fix it. When? Eventually. That's not a day. I rolled my eyes and went to my room. I had already decided how this would work. We would split the bills, avoid each other, and survive the 6-month lease without becoming friends. Easy. Around 2 in the morning, a sharp tapping sound woke me. I stepped into the hallway and found Mason in the kitchen, quietly repairing the broken leg of my small desk chair. He glanced up, caught in the yellow light above the stove. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. I leaned against the doorway. Why are you fixing that now? He tested the chair, then stood. Figured you'd need it for work tomorrow. There was no sarcasm in his voice. No annoyed look. Just that simple answer. My stomach did something uncomfortable. Thanks, I managed. Mason held my gaze for a second longer than necessary, then nodded and walked past me. The next morning, my coffee mug was washed and sitting beside a fresh bag of the exact dark roast I always bought. I stared at it for a long time. Then I told myself it meant nothing. He was probably just trying to make up for taking over the fridge. That explanation worked perfectly, until I realized I had never told him what kind of coffee I drank. For the next week, Mason kept doing things that didn't match the version of him I had already decided to hate. He still left his gym bag by the door. He still used the cast-iron skillet and somehow made the entire apartment smell like garlic at 7 in the morning. But he also started making 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. Mine always had a splash of oat creamer. No sugar. Exactly right. I never asked how he knew. I was afraid the answer would matter too much. We settled into a routine without talking about it. Mason left before 7 for the rehabilitation center. I worked from the desk he had fixed, usually until my shoulders hurt and the sun disappeared behind the buildings across the street. Around 6, I would hear his key in the lock. Then the scrape of sneakers. The refrigerator opening. You eat today became his version of hello. Coffee counts. It doesn't. That sounds like an opinion. He would give me that look. The one that made me feel like I had disappointed a very muscular school nurse. Then, 20 minutes later, there would be a container beside my laptop. Chicken, rice, vegetables. Nothing fancy. Still warm. You don't have to feed me, I told him one night. Mason leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. You forget. I get busy. You forget because you get busy. That's the same thing. His mouth pulled into a small smile. This time, he didn't hide it. Eat, Ethan. I hated how my name sounded in his voice. Lower. Softer than the rest of the sentence. I also hated that I listened. By Friday, the apartment no longer felt like a place I was borrowing. My books had made it onto the shelves. Mason stopped moving my mug from the counter. We even watched half a basketball game together, though I understood almost none of it. He tried explaining a foul to me, got frustrated, and moved closer on the couch to show me a replay on his phone. His knee pressed against mine. Neither of us moved. The contact was small, barely anything. My body noticed anyway. You're not listening, he murmured. I looked up. Mason was already watching me. Not the phone. Me. His eyes stayed there for 1 second. Then 2. My breath hitched. I'm listening. What did I just say? Something about a defensive violation. His eyebrows lifted. That was 5 minutes ago. Heat climbed up my neck. I looked back at the television. Basketball is boring. Mason laughed under his breath, but he didn't move his leg away. The next afternoon, I tried opening a can of tomatoes with the cheap opener I had brought from my old apartment. The handle slipped. The metal edge caught the side of my finger. Damn it. Mason was across the kitchen before I could reach the sink. Let me see. It's nothing. He caught my wrist anyway. Firm, careful. He turned my hand beneath the overhead light, his thumb resting against my pulse. The cut was tiny. His reaction wasn't. His jaw tightened like I had done something personally offensive. You need a bandage. I need a better can opener. You need both. He cleaned the cut, then wrapped a bandage around my finger with ridiculous concentration. I watched his face because looking at our hands felt dangerous. When he finished, he didn't let go. His thumb stayed against my wrist. My pulse was beating too fast. I knew he could feel it. Mason lifted his eyes to mine. The kitchen went quiet. You always get this nervous when someone helps you? The question landed somewhere deep in my chest. I tried to laugh, but it came out thin. I'm not nervous. His gaze dropped briefly to where he was still holding me, then back to my face. Right. He let go slowly. Too slowly. I stood there after he walked away, staring at the bandage like it might explain what had just happened. It meant nothing. He was only being nice. That was what I told myself. The problem was, my skin still felt warm where his hand had been. 3 nights later, Mason found out I was gay because I left my phone face up on the kitchen counter. That was it. No dramatic confession. No carefully planned conversation. Just a message lighting up the screen while I was rinsing a plate. You still coming to Jake's on Saturday, or are you going to avoid every gay bar in Chicago forever? I saw Mason's eyes drop to the notification before I could grab the phone. His expression barely changed, but the room did. At least, it felt like it did. I picked up the phone too quickly and nearly knocked over my glass. Claire has a weird sense of humor. Mason leaned against the opposite counter, watching me. Claire calls you, Ethan? A weight dropped in my stomach. The message was from Daniel. Of course his name was right there. I locked the screen and shoved the phone into my pocket. It's complicated. Doesn't sound complicated. His voice was calm. That somehow made it worse. I stared at the water running over my plate, even though it had been clean for at least 30 seconds. Mason stayed quiet behind me. I could feel him waiting. Are you gay? There it was. Direct. Simple. Impossible to dodge without making everything worse. I turned off the faucet. Yeah. Mason blinked once, then nodded. Okay. I looked at him. Okay. Yeah. That's all. His eyebrows pulled together. Was there supposed to be more? I laughed, but it came out sharp. No. I guess not. For a second, neither of us moved. Mason's gaze stayed on my face like he was trying to read something I hadn't said. Then he looked away and reached for the dish towel. You could have told me. A sudden defensiveness flared in my chest. We've known each other for 2 weeks. We live together. That doesn't mean you get my full biography. His jaw flexed. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He opened his mouth, stopped, then rubbed the back of his neck. Nothing. That word sat between us for the rest of the night. The next morning, everything looked normal. Mason made coffee. I answered emails. He asked if I had a meeting at 10. I told him yes. Normal. Except he wore a shirt while making breakfast. Mason never wore a shirt in the morning. I noticed immediately, which was humiliating. Then he stopped sitting beside me on the couch. Not far away. Just farther than before. Conversations got shorter. The accidental touches disappeared. Even when we reached for the same cabinet, He stepped back first. I told myself it was fine. Better, maybe. Cleaner. No more stupid moments to overthink. But the apartment felt different without them. By Friday, I was working late when Mason came home carrying 2 takeout bags. I got Ty. He placed one beside my laptop. Pad CEW. No peanuts. I looked up. You remembered. His eyes met mine, then dropped to the screen. You ordered it last week. Right. Another silence. He shifted his weight like he wanted to leave, then stopped. Ethan. Yeah. Mason looked toward the hallway, then back at me. Something uncertain crossed his face. It was gone almost immediately. Never mind. He walked away before I could ask. Later that night, I stepped out of my room for water and found him standing in the hallway outside my door. He wasn't knocking. He was just there, one hand curled loosely at his side, staring at the floor like he had been arguing with himself. When he noticed me, his head lifted fast. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. His eyes held mine longer than they should have. Then he took a step back. Couldn't sleep, he muttered. Wrong hallway. He gave a quiet, humorless laugh. Yeah, guess so. Mason returned to his room and closed the door. I stood there with my heart pounding, finally admitting something I had been avoiding since the kitchen. He was acting differently, but it didn't feel like disgust. It felt like fear. And somehow, that was worse. By Sunday, Mason and I had become experts at avoiding each other without leaving the apartment. I worked in my room with the door half closed. He watched television with the volume low. We still shared a kitchen, a bathroom, and the same narrow hallway, but somehow we had turned all of it into neutral territory. It should have made things easier. It didn't. The silence followed me everywhere. That night, I walked into the kitchen and found Mason standing at the counter, cutting vegetables with more force than necessary. You know, you can just say it. He didn't look up. Say what? Whatever you've been trying not to say for the last 3 days. The knife stopped. Mason set it down carefully. I'm not trying to say anything. Right. I opened the refrigerator, even though I wasn't hungry. That's why you were standing outside my room at midnight. His shoulders tightened. I told you. I couldn't sleep. And somehow you got lost 10 feet from your own door. That finally made him look at me. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse. Frustrated. Cornered. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Pushing. I laughed once, without humor. You started acting like I became radioactive overnight. Mason. I'm allowed to wonder why. He dragged a hand over his face. You aren't radioactive. Then stop acting weird because I'm gay. The words came out louder than I meant them to. The apartment went still. Mason stared at me, jaw tight, breathing slowly through his nose. That's not why. Then what is it? He looked away. I stepped closer before I could talk myself out of it. What changed? Ethan. No. You don't get to say my name like that, and then shut down. His eyes snapped back to mine. We were standing too close now. Close enough that I could see the small muscle jumping near his jaw. Close enough that one step would erase the space between us. I'm trying to figure something out, he said quietly. My stomach plummeted. Whether you can live with me? His face changed immediately. What? No. Then what? Mason's hand lifted like he was going to reach for me. It stopped halfway. For 1 second, his fingers hovered near my wrist, exactly where he had held me before. Neither of us moved. My pulse started pounding. Why did you pull away? I asked. His eyes dropped to my mouth. Just for a second. It was enough. My chest constricted so hard I almost forgot to breathe. Mason. He stepped closer. I didn't back up. His hand brushed mine against the edge of the counter. Barely a touch. Still, neither of us moved away. Do you want me to move? The question came out softer than I intended. He looked at me like I had asked the wrong question and the only one that mattered. No, his fingers closed around mine for half a second. Warm. Careful. Then the front door swung open. Claire walked in holding a grocery bag and froze. Mason dropped my hand immediately. I stepped back so fast my hip hit the counter. Claire looked between us. Okay, she said slowly. I can come back. You have a key? Mason's voice was rough. Emergency key. Ethan forgot he invited me. I had. Completely. Claire lifted the bag. I brought wine and bad advice. Mason muttered something about finishing dinner and left the kitchen. I watched him disappear down the hallway. Claire waited until his door closed. Then she turned to me. What exactly did I interrupt? Nothing. She glanced at my hand, then at the hallway. Sure. That night, after Claire left, I opened my laptop and searched for available rooms in Chicago. I told myself it was practical. 6 months was a long time to live with someone who couldn't even explain why he looked at me like that. I didn't hear Mason come up behind me. "You're looking for a new place?" I turned. He was staring at the screen, and the hurt on his face was impossible to miss. "I thought that was what you wanted." Mason looked at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "You really have no idea, do you? Then explain it." The words came out before I could soften them. Mason stayed near the couch, staring at the apartment listings on my screen. His shoulders were tense, but his voice was quiet. "I don't want you to move. You have a strange way of showing that." He looked down, jaw tightening. "I know." For a second, neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. A car horn sounded somewhere below. Normal sounds. Nothing about the room felt normal. Then why did everything change? I asked. Mason rubbed both hands over his face. "Because I didn't know how to act after I found out." My stomach twisted. "That's not exactly reassuring." "Not because you're gay." He stepped closer. "Because I started noticing things." My mouth went dry. "What things?" His eyes lifted to mine, then moved away just as quickly. "The way you look at me. The way I look back." My heart hit hard against my ribs. Mason let out a slow breath. "I'm not saying that means anything." There it was. The retreat. The part where he opened the door and slammed it shut before I could step through. "Right," I muttered. "Of course not." "Ethan." "No, it's fine." I closed the laptop. "You don't want me to leave, but you also don't want anything to be different." "That makes perfect sense." His hand caught the edge of the screen before I could stand. "Not touching me. Still stopping me." "I'm trying." "Trying what?" The answer never came. A sharp knock hit the front door. Mason stepped back immediately. I hated how fast he did it. Claire walked in first, followed by a guy I recognized from the photos on her phone. "Surprise," she announced, holding up a pizza box. "This is Ben." He was nearby, and I decided none of us should eat alone. Ben shook my hand, then looked at Mason. "So you're the roommate." Something in his tone made Mason glance at me. Apparently. We ended up around the kitchen island with pizza, beer, and enough forced conversation to make me regret every life choice that had led there. Claire watched Mason and me like she was studying a crime scene. Ben was less subtle. "So how long have you two been together?" I nearly choked. Mason froze with his bottle halfway to his mouth. Claire kicked Ben under the counter. "They're roommates." "That's what I meant." Ben looked between us. "You act married." "We don't," I said too quickly. Mason looked down at his beer. Ben shrugged. "Could have fooled me. He knew your order before you even opened the box." I looked at Mason. He had put the mushroom slices on my plate and taken the pepperoni for himself. I hadn't noticed. Claire had. Of course she had. "Roommate stuff," Mason muttered. The words landed harder than they should have. I nodded like I agreed. Like my chest hadn't tightened. Later, Ben mentioned a friend of his named Noah who was funny, normal, and actually available. Claire immediately brightened. "Ethan should meet him." Mason's hand stopped around his bottle. "Why?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "Because Ethan is single." "I know that." "Then why do you sound annoyed?" Mason leaned back, expression closing off. "I don't." The rest of the night, he barely spoke. After they left, I found him in the kitchen, gathering empty bottles with clipped, angry movements. "You could meet him," he said without looking at me. "Noah." I watched his shoulders. "You want me to?" "It's your life." The same cold sentence I had used on him earlier. I understood immediately. He was pushing me away before I could make him choose. "Fine," I replied. Mason finally looked at me. The hurt in his eyes flashed so quickly I almost missed it. "Fine." He walked to his room and closed the door. 10 minutes later, Claire texted me Noah's number. Under it, she added one sentence. "Your roommate looked like you just broke up with him." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then another notification appeared. From Mason. Asterisk, "I'm not uncomfortable with you. I'm uncomfortable with how much I care what you do." Asterisk, I read Mason's message 3 times before I finally stood up. His bedroom door was closed, but light showed beneath it. I crossed the hallway and knocked once. "Mason." "Nothing." I knocked again. "You can't send something like that and disappear." The door opened a few inches. He stood there in a black t-shirt and sweatpants, one hand still on the knob. His face looked tired, guarded. "I didn't disappear. You're hiding in your room." "That's not the same thing. It is when your room is 10 feet away." For half a second, I thought he might smile. He didn't. His eyes dropped to my phone, still open to the message. I shouldn't have sent that. My pulse skipped. Did you mean it? Mason looked past me toward the living room. Ethan, that's not an answer. He let go of the door and walked back into his room. I followed before he could stop me. It was the first time I had been inside. Everything was neat. Bedmate, shoes lined against the wall, a duffel bag half-packed on the chair. I noticed that last part immediately. Are you going somewhere? Mason glanced at the bag. My brother wants me to stay with him for a few days. Why? His jaw shifted. Because apparently I've been acting strange at work. People noticed? My coworker did. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at his hands. She asked why I kept checking my phone. Then she asked if I was waiting for someone. I stayed near the doorway. Were you? Mason gave a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. You? My stomach dropped. He rubbed his palms together, staring at the floor. I kept thinking you'd text and say you were leaving, or that you were going out with that Noah guy. I haven't even met him. His head lifted. Not yet. The jealousy in his voice was impossible to miss. It should have made me feel better. Instead, it made everything more dangerous. Why do you care? Mason stood. Slowly. You know why. No, I don't. I hated how unsteady my voice sounded. You keep getting close, then acting like it meant nothing. He stepped toward me. It didn't mean nothing. The room went quiet. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Mason stopped a few feet away. When I held your wrist in the kitchen, I noticed your pulse. His eyes stayed on mine. Then I realized mine was doing the same thing. I forgot how to breathe. Mason, when you fell asleep on my shoulder, I stayed there for almost an hour. He looked embarrassed now, which somehow made the confession feel more real. My arm went numb. I still didn't move. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Mason took another step, and when Claire walked in, his gaze dropped briefly to my hand. I wasn't letting go because I felt awkward. Then why did you? Because she saw us. There was no us. His expression tightened. That's the problem. The words landed between us. Heavy. Honest. I looked at the bag on the chair. So you're leaving because of me? I'm leaving because I don't know what I'm doing. He exhaled slowly. I've dated women. I've never looked at a man and felt like this. I don't know what that makes me, and I don't know what happens if I get it wrong. My chest softened despite everything. You don't have to figure out your whole life tonight. Mason held my gaze. I know. He moved close enough that our hands almost touched. But I know I didn't want you to leave. His fingers brushed mine. This time, he didn't pull away. And I don't want things to go back to normal. I looked down at our hands, then back at him. What do you want? Mason swallowed. His thumb moved once across my knuckles. Careful. Almost nervous. I want to stop pretending I don't care. For 1 second, I thought Mason was going to close the distance between us. His hand was still around mine. His eyes dropped to my mouth, then lifted again. The room felt too small, too quiet. I could hear both of us breathing. Then his phone rang. Mason flinched like the sound had pulled him out of something dangerous. He let go and checked the screen. It's my brother. I nodded, even though my chest had gone tight again. You should answer. He didn't move at first. Then the phone rang again. Mason stepped into the hallway, and I stayed in his room, staring at the space between us like it had just become a physical thing. His voice carried through the half-open door. No, I'm fine. A pause. I told you. I just need a few days. Another pause, longer this time. Because I don't know how to explain it. I should have walked away. Instead, I stood there listening to every word I wasn't supposed to hear. No, he didn't do anything. Mason lowered his voice. That's not the problem. A cold weight sank into my stomach. A second later, he looked back and saw me. His whole expression changed. I have to go, he told his brother, then ended the call. I stepped into the hallway. I thought I wasn't the problem. You aren't. That sounded pretty clear. Mason dragged a hand over his face. Ethan, please. You said you didn't want things to go back to normal. Now you're packing a bag and telling your brother you can't explain what's happening. Because I can't. His voice sharpened, then softened immediately. Not yet. I crossed my arms, mostly to stop my hands from shaking. So what happens now? You disappear for a few days and come back pretending none of this happened. I'm not pretending. You're leaving. Because I'm scared. The honesty stopped me. Mason looked down the hall toward the living room, then back at me. My brother knows me better than anyone. If I show up like this, he's going to know something changed. And that's bad. I don't know. He swallowed. That's the part you keep missing. You've had time to understand who you are. I've had about a week to realize I might have been wrong about myself for years. The anger drained out of me, leaving something heavier behind. I'm not asking you for a label. I know. I'm not asking you to tell your family. I know. Then what are you afraid of? Mason held my gaze. That I do this badly and hurt you. The answer hit harder than I expected. He moved closer, but not enough to touch me. You already assume people are going to leave when things get complicated. I see it every time you start packing emotionally before anyone has even gone anywhere. I looked away. That was too accurate. And you assume distance is safer, I muttered. Maybe we both have bad habits. A faint smile touched his mouth, but it disappeared quickly. He reached for the duffel bag inside his room. I still need the weekend. I nodded, pretending that didn't feel like rejection. Sure. Mason walked to the front door, then stopped with his hand on the knob. Ethan. I looked up. I'm not leaving because I regret what I said. His eyes stayed on mine. I meant all of it. Then he left. The apartment felt wrong without him. Too quiet. Too clean. By Saturday night, I had convinced myself he wasn't coming back. At 11:43, my phone lit up with a message from Claire. Noah is at Jake's tonight. Come out. I stared at it for a long time before typing back yes. Not because I wanted Noah. Because Mason had asked for distance, and I was trying to prove I could give it to him. I had just reached the bar when another message appeared. From Mason. I'm coming home tomorrow. We need to talk about us. I read it twice. Then a hand touched my shoulder. I turned and found Noah smiling at me. Across the room, reflected in the dark window behind him, I saw someone standing outside in the rain. Mason. For a second, I thought I was imagining him. Mason stood beneath the awning across the street, rain darkening the shoulders of his jacket, his eyes fixed on me through the bar window. Noah was still talking, something about Claire overselling his personality, but I barely heard him. My pulse had already started climbing. You okay? Noah followed my stare. You know that guy? Mason looked away first. Then he turned and started walking. Yeah, I breathed. I do. I was outside before Noah could answer. Cold rain hit my face as I crossed the street. Mason. He kept moving. Mason, stop. He did, but he didn't turn around. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets. His shoulders looked rigid. You asked for space, I said, trying to catch my breath. I gave it to you. That was fast. I stared at the back of his head. You think I'm on a date? Mason finally faced me. Water ran from his hair onto his forehead. Aren't you? Noah introduced himself 30 seconds ago. You came here to meet him. Because you left. His jaw tightened. I told you I was coming back. After 2 days of silence. I texted you. Tonight. We stood there with cars moving behind us and rain collecting around our shoes. Mason looked past me toward the bar. Noah was visible through the window, pretending not to watch. He seems nice. Don't do that. Mason's eyes returned to mine. Do what? Act like you want me to choose someone else because you're scared to choose me. The words hung between us. Mason went completely still. I stepped closer. I'm tired of pretending this is normal. He swallowed. Ethan, no. You wanted to talk about us. So talk. His gaze dropped to the sidewalk. I saw you with him, and I hated it. My chest ached. Mason pulled one hand from his pocket, flexing his fingers like he didn't know what to do with them. I hated that he touched your shoulder. I hated that you smiled at him. And I hated that I had no right to be angry. You could have a right. He looked up. That's not something I know how to do halfway. Neither is disappearing. I know. His voice cracked slightly, almost lost beneath the rain. I went to my brother's place because I thought distance would make this clearer. It didn't. I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my phone. I kept thinking about you leaving. He took a slow breath. Then my brother asked if there was someone. I waited. Mason's eyes stayed on mine. What did you tell him? I told him there might be. My heart hit hard against my ribs. Might be. I panicked. Despite everything, a laugh escaped me. Mason looked offended. This is not funny. A little. Ethan, you came to a gay bar in the rain after telling your brother there might be someone. That's at least a little dramatic. His mouth twitched, but the smile vanished quickly. I don't know what to call this yet. Then don't call it anything. I moved closer until only a few inches separated us. Just stop acting like it's nothing. Mason's hand lifted, hesitated, then closed gently around mine. Right there on the sidewalk. In public. His thumb pressed against my knuckles. It's not nothing. The words were quiet. Certain. I looked down at our hands, then back at him. Are you going to let go if someone sees? Mason glanced toward the bar window. Noah and at least 3 other people were definitely watching. His fingers tightened around mine. No, for a moment, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped against the awning above us. Mason stepped closer, his forehead almost touching mine. I'm scared, he admitted. I know. I might get things wrong. You probably will. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. That's not comforting. I'm still here. Mason looked at me for a long time. Then he whispered, come home with me. Not to hide. Not to forget this happened. Just home. I squeezed his hand. Okay. And for the first time, neither of us pretended it was only a roommate thing. The walk home took 15 minutes, and Mason held my hand the entire way. Not loosely. Not like he might let go if someone looked too long. His fingers stayed locked with mine through the rain, past crowded sidewalks, past the late-night diner on the corner, past two guys smoking beneath a bus shelter who definitely noticed us. Every time I expected Mason to pull away, he did the opposite. He moved closer. By the time we reached our building, neither of us had said much. We didn't need to. The silence felt different now. Not awkward. Full. Inside the apartment, Mason closed the door behind us and leaned against it for a second. His hair was wet. His jacket dripped onto the floor. I looked down at our hands. Still joined. You know we're inside now, I murmured. I know. You can let go. Mason's thumb moved slowly across my knuckles. I know. A warmth spread through my chest, and this time I didn't fight it. He stepped closer. Not rushed. Not dramatic. He gave me enough time to move away. I stayed exactly where I was. I don't know what happens tomorrow, he admitted. Neither do I. That usually bothers me. Everything bothers you. He gave me a look. You made a rule about shoes. That was you. Right. A quiet laugh passed between us, easing something neither of us had known how to carry. Then Mason lifted his free hand and touched the side of my face. Gentle, almost careful enough to hurt. Can I kiss you? My pulse skipped a beat. You took long enough. His smile was small and nervous. I had never seen him look nervous before. Then he leaned in. The kiss was brief. Warm. A little uncertain. Nothing like the dramatic moment I had imagined during all those nights of pretending I wasn't imagining it. It was better because it was real. When we pulled apart, Mason rested his forehead against mine. Neither of us moved. Still want to find a new apartment? He whispered. Depends. On what? Are you going to keep taking over the refrigerator? Absolutely. Then I'll consider my options. His hand tightened around mine. Ethan. I smiled. I'm staying. The next morning, our routine looked almost exactly the same. Mason made coffee before work. I sat at the kitchen counter answering emails. His gym bag was still blocking the hallway, and my mug was still beside the sink instead of inside the cabinet. Nothing had changed, except everything had. When Mason placed my coffee in front of me, he leaned down and pressed a quick kiss to my temple. Then he froze, like he was waiting to see whether the world would fall apart. It didn't. I reached for his wrist before he could walk away. Do that again. His expression softened. Bossy. It's a request. Definitely a rule. A few weeks later, Claire and Ben came over for pizza. Mason sat beside me on the couch instead of taking the chair across the room. His knee stayed pressed against mine. Halfway through the night, his hand found mine between the cushions. Claire noticed immediately. Of course she did. She smiled into her drink, but, for once, kept her mouth shut. Mason glanced at me, checking. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. We never made some huge announcement. Mason told his brother when he was ready. I stopped treating every quiet moment like the beginning of an ending. We still argued about dishes, groceries, and the thermostat. He still asked whether I had eaten. I still pretended to be annoyed when he made enough dinner for both of us. The old rule sheet stayed on the refrigerator until one morning I found a new line written at the bottom in Mason's handwriting. Rule 11. Stop calling this a roommate thing. I laughed so loudly he came out of his room to check on me. Then I took the marker and wrote underneath it. Rule 12. Don't leave. Mason read it, looked at me, and placed his hand over mine. Wasn't planning to. I had spent so much time believing people left when things became complicated. Mason taught me something simpler. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with perfect timing or easy answers. Sometimes it shows up in a fixed chair, a cup of coffee, a hand that stays when it could pull away. And sometimes home isn't the place you finally escape to. It's the person who gives you a reason to stay.